Always amazing how many wonderful people we get to work with in doing this work. So that was fantastic. Thank you both for taking that and opening us up this morning, getting us all re-energized and ready to go today. I want to sort of continue this theme of strengthening the connection between the sort of the past, present, and future of ArtPlace, where we've been and where we're going. And it's, I think it was particularly relevant to have Dennis on stage because the first one of these summits was back in Miami, which is Knight's sort of home city, in 2013. And I don't know that any of us at that time could have predicted sort of where we'd be today in this work and the conversations that we'd be having. It's been evolving so quickly and so intensely in such an awesome way. But I do want to sort of step back. The conversation at that first summit, they looked at sort of various aspects of creating a narrative in place, the sort of integrating arts-based activities with other stakeholders in the field, connecting projects to residents and entrepreneurs to help achieve goals, increasing the impact of different types of creative placemaking tactics and strategies. And if you sort of step back, you're like, oh, place, community challenges, engaged arts-based activities, impact. Sounds a little bit like the 4 points that have sort of been moving. We're constantly honing and refining these things. We had discussions around connecting creative placemaking work with various levels of government. We had federal, state, and local representatives, the intersection of cities and innovation, some brainstorming sessions on how to address the challenges presented by civic leaders with creative placemaking strategies, the role of community foundations, various types of capital. Again, now we're getting into that matrix, right? All those different kinds of players. So these conversations that we're having now, even if they're feeling new, they're conversations that we've been having over the last few years. And then for those of you who were in LA with us last year, or listening via the web last year, that was when we sort of took it a step further, introducing this idea of the arts as a core sector of community planning and development, and also building on this idea that we're really here to support that growing field of creative placemaking. We had a really interesting conversation. Are we a movement? Are we a field? And I think for us, and as Jamie Bennett likes to say, what was important is that we were a we. Right? That all of us in this room were like, we're something. Whether it's a movement or a field or a sector or whatever we want to call ourselves, we are a we. And that was a really exciting, I think, movement forward for all of us. And that we're here to really change the way that community planning and development happens and change the way that people think about and interact with their communities through the added value of arts and cultural strategies. We also last year introduced the 4 lines of work that we have now. Our sort of continued dedication to the National Grant-Making Program, our commitment to learning not just from the delegates, we don't call them winners, from the delegates that have been selected through the grant program to look at different models of creative placemaking, but also everybody else that's interested in doing this work that's come in through our grant-making program and are interested in engaging with all of those folks. We introduced what at the time was to be the new set of investments that's now the community development investments. I'm going to talk about that in detail in just a minute. Our interest in expanding and deepening our research activities around creative placemaking, and Jamie Hand is going to talk about that this morning. And our pledge to really support the growing infrastructure for practitioners to help connect to one another and really sort of understanding how this work can link up through our field building activities, which Prentice is going to talk about a little bit today. So we introduced those ideas, and now we're really putting them into motion, and I know my colleagues are really excited to share with you sort of where we are in that thinking. So in many ways, even as we've sort of updated and added to our activities, refined our thinking, pivoted if we want to use a tech term, shifted if we want to use our sort of new way of talking about things, we've really stayed true to the idea that it's critical to consider this work within the context of broader place-based change. The arts sector cannot and should not be tasked with doing this work alone, and we need to support not just what's coming out of the arts field, but what's coming out of the community development field and how we can really support that intersection. And that our success will be measured by the same things that everyone cares about: making places better, deepening the connections between neighbors, providing platforms for the creation of better quality of lives for everyone in this country, and that all of us, not just the ArtPlace staff, have the responsibility to continue to connect across sectors directly and showcase how this work can provide the added value that it does, that we know that it does in this room, this we that we've created. So, in the last couple of years while we've been undergoing this transition ourselves, we have been listening to you all. We've been listening to the conversations that have been happening in the field and building our own internal infrastructure so that we can make these next 5 years as productive as possible. And again, we're really excited to share with you. I do want to sort of talk through this transition just a little bit and talk about it because it's been happening over the last few years, and just sort of remind folks of where we've been and where we're going. So, I think many of you have heard at some point or another the ArtPlace origin story where Rocco Landesman, then chairman of the NEA, brought together some foundation colleagues to have a conversation about how do we shift the way we talk about the arts from the sort of world of scarcity to the world of abundance? And how do we connect up the role that the arts can play with many of the other federal colleagues that the NEA works with, DOT, HUD, EPA, USDA, education? How do we actually have that conversation so that we're not just focused on increasing the National Endowment for the Arts budget, but we're focused on finding new ways that the arts can become a part of everybody's agendas? And, we knew that it was going to take more than just talking points to make that case. And so ArtPlace was created and in 2011 announced its first round of grants to showcase this work and to explore these projects and models. And we do have some of our round one trailblazers in the room, so lovely to see you all again. And along with that announcement came the opening of the second round of grant making, and we received LOIs from over 2,000 organizations and individuals from around the country. And if that doesn't tell you that there's a hunger for this, I don't know what does. And it was those two first rounds of grantees that came together back in Miami. And with that milestone convening, the 2 years of grants made, a third in process with a new set of finalists, this is all back in 2013, the conversation among many of the funders really deepened around this idea of the federal engagement and how do we actually link up to many of our other colleagues in the private sector and the federal world, and thinking about sort of how these money flows, the different kinds of money flow. We have programs at the federal level like Sustainable Communities, Strong Cities, Strong Communities, Promise Zones, Greening of America. There's got to be some intersections here that we can think about. And those are what are really setting the tone for community development as a sector moving forward. So how do we actually be a part of that conversation? And then at that time, our first director, Carol Coletta, who Dennis was just speaking about, who really, I think, helped start the wildfire around the term creative placemaking, putting a word on work that's been happening for years, but really never had that rallying term to rally around. But she had the unique and wonderful opportunity to go join Dennis at the Knight Foundation. And that sort of shift gave us, as an organization, an opportunity to really think through what it is that we're trying to do. We were incredibly lucky to have Force of Nature, Jeremy Nowak, join us as our interim director, and he worked with many of our foundation colleagues to put together the strategic plan that ultimately guided those new 4 lines of business and the really important decision that we were going to sunset in 10 years, which has been sort of the way for us to think about a lot of different, how do we really prioritize, strategize, and do the best work that we can in the period of time without worrying about building an institution. With that, again, we continued to run the National Grant Making Program during that time, continued to plan the LA Summit. We worked to develop a new agreement between the funders, shifted our fiscal agent relationship from the Nonprofit Finance Fund to the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. And in the midst of all of this, Jamie Bennett was hired, which was really awesome and exciting, and his commitment to that, yes, right? Yep. We're going to do this. Was a really wonderful moment, and his dedication to that strategic plan that the funders came up with was just so critical. And then, and I do want to take an opportunity to also thank all of you for everything that you contributed during these transition years, your reflections, your ideas, your continued hard work in pushing the boundaries of creative placemaking practice. Couldn't be a more inspiring group of people. It's such an honor to work with all of you. And now at ArtPlace, we have a staff of 8 people that are all amazing, that we are so honored to work with. And again, if you have not met them yet, please introduce yourself. We want to know all of you. They want to know all of you. So we're really excited to sort of to be at this moment where we're now running. I do want to take a moment, though, to talk about this new line of business that's sort of I think the one that has been most mysterious in some ways from the National Grant Making Program, our research and our field building, and that's the community development investments. And in many ways, this program represents an opportunity for us to bring all of our different activities and thinking and experiences into one program and do something big. We have this stated goal that Jamie laid out yesterday of positioning arts and culture as a core sector of comprehensive community planning and development. And we believe that achieving this will, again, involve important shifts not just in the arts sector, but in the field of community planning and development, or the fields, I should say, the sectors, the movements, I don't know, of community planning and development. That matrix that we introduced yesterday, that's the world we're trying to influence. So as we considered the challenge of our early days and the sort of conversations among the funders around how we connect with our federal partners, how we connect with our private sector partners, we knew that there were sort of multiple ways we might think about influencing this practice. One might be to focus on the government. And we've seen a lot of really amazing foundation initiatives, the Rockefeller Philanthropies, 100 Resilient Cities, Bloomberg's Mayor's Challenge, that have focused on that governmental sort of set theory of change. We're gonna start at the top, and if we can get that top shifted, that's gonna shift everything. And I think there's a lot of amazing things happening through those programs. But we wanted to really think about how do we complement that with this set of investments, because there is this underlying sort of sustainable community development infrastructure that lives out through all the election cycles, that is the one actually on the ground doing the hard work. So our hope was to complement those many government investments in shifting the ways that things work with investments in this infrastructure by focusing on place-based, non-governmental organizations that have a defined geographical focus, are working to achieve a number of different types of social, economic, and physical enhancements in their geographical area, that regularly partner and work across sectors to achieve these community outcomes, and that have a long-term vision and presence in their community. Those were our criteria, our eligibility criteria for the Community Development Investments Program. And we know that we can achieve great things in communities by providing the sort of types of large, one-time grants that we've been making through our National Grant Making Program. And this portfolio has surfaced innumerable great ideas, models, and leaders. I mean, you're all sitting in this room. And now we're hoping to transfer all of those ideas, lessons, and models into this infrastructure, into this community development infrastructure. To date, I think there have been a number of these sort of community planning and development organizations, or a small number rather, that have incorporated arts and cultural strategies into their regular practice. And many of you are sitting in this room or watching or a part of this conversation. There's sort of a slightly larger set, I think, of these kinds of organizations that have tested out partnerships and processes on a sort of project basis with the arts and cultural sector, but really not sort of thought about how it can integrate across and influence all the ways that they work. And then I think there's this large subset of these kinds of community planning and development organizations that have had limited contact with the arts and cultural sector, and I think are probably still unfamiliar with many of the ways that the sector can contribute to helping them achieve their goals. So if this work is to be taken up by those broader set of players, we need to understand all of the shifts that it's going to take for those organizations to actually build those relationships. What are the models they need to know? How do you staff this work at that kind of organization? How do you build the relationships with the arts sector? We know it's not always easy. We're not always speaking the same language. We're not always coming from the same place. That process, what it actually takes, that's a real process that we're hoping to really learn from. And then what are the sort of broader community policies type things and conversations that need to happen around this work, again, to help it make it successful in this sector. And then we also need to understand what works. What and how can specific arts and cultural strategies improve the ability to achieve the sort of intended community outcomes that many of these organizations have. And so with the Community Development Investments Program, we're selecting community planning and development organizations that do not currently have a significant history of working with the arts and cultural sector as a major part of their work, or have sort of done so on a limited project basis. And I got a lot of questions about that. You know, oh, you're supporting people who haven't done this work yet? And the idea is to go on that journey. It's to experience that with us for 3 years and actually learn what it takes, and then share that out beyond to the rest of the that's what happens when I leave vibrating on, to the rest of the world, and to the rest of folks who might just be starting the journey themselves. So I know many of you sitting in this room have had the chance to meet some of our finalists who are here. There's 21 of them. We're going to select one organization in each of 6 regions that will receive up to $3 million over the course of 3 years, up to $1 million a year for 3 years. It's a big program. And the idea is that we're not just trying to ask people to do one project. We are asking people to look at all the different ways that they work, organizations to look at all the different ways that they work, and think about how we can put this into processes, into planning, into projects, into capital investments, into understanding sort of impact and telling the story of the work. Across the board, how do we look at this? We're not asking organizations to create a new line of arts-based work. We're saying we actually think that across all of the work that you do, we can add value as an art sector. So it's really exciting. And our finalists, it's a really diverse group, and that's intentional because there's so many different kinds of organizations that do this work. So, you know, we have public health organizations, we have traditional CDCs, Native-led organizations, Main Streets, economic development entities, and that's intentional, working in communities of all sizes. So we have Alaska communities, California communities, rural Minnesota, rural Southwest. We have Philadelphia, and we have the Southeast sort of defined by 10 set of states that are being represented. Those are the 6 regions. We're going to pick one organization from each of those. So again, if you haven't met any of these people in the room, please talk to them. So during the course of these 3 years, we're going to start by asking these organizations to undergo a cultural asset mapping process. And this is to make sure that we have a full picture of who that sector is and who those partners can be, so that we can go in co-designing some of these projects and ideas with the arts sector. So it's not, you know, this organization coming in and saying, we're going to do this, and we're going to hire this artist to do this thing that we thought of. It's really about how do we actually get to know who the arts are in the community and link that up early on. So the first sort of big thing is the cultural asset mapping. Over the 3 years, we're going to be working with each organization to understand, again, all of its priorities, projects, ways of working. And we're going to be calling on many of you, actually, to help provide the support, advice, and models to help inform the way that we're working. So this is a brain trust. These folks in this room and these folks that are out doing this work in the field. We want to bring you all into these communities to help them think through this process. So there's a pretty heavy TA component, technical assistance component, throughout the course of this program. And then in addition to this sort of cultural asset mapping and TA, again, this is also an opportunity for us to throw everything into this program and really link back to that initial goal of the funders. So in addition to the grant funds and the TA, we're also working with Jeremy Nowak, our previous interim director and former founding CEO of the Reinvestment Fund, who I know some of you visited yesterday, and also former president of the William Penn Foundation, to really explore the role of debt and alternate sources of capital in support of creative placemaking work. So we're taking the grant funds, and we're going to be looking at how we can do some debt financing on top of that with many of our bank partners. So not just, again, what philanthropic dollars can do, but what can all kinds of dollars do to help support this work? And how can we frame this work meaningfully to lenders? So we're really looking forward to engaging our bank partners, some local CDFIs in the selected communities to explore these opportunities. And then the second thing is that we will be directly engaging a number of our federal partners in an advisory capacity around the sort of available grant opportunities, looking a little bit at the Strong Cities, Strong Communities model of thinking through what federal grants exist in a place and how can we help layer these strategies in, but then also what are the potential federal grants that maybe haven't been leveraged into this kind of work. You know, have you gotten a farmer's market grant from USDA? What are those opportunities that exist across the sectors, across HUD and EPA and USDA and DOT, that we can actually from the ground up layer in arts-based strategies? So we'll be working with some of our federal partners to think through what that process looks like in terms of working with the grantees. And I think that the critical thing there is that we want to make sure then that the stories of these projects are reaching not just the secretaries of these departments' ears, and we want that to happen, but also, the state level employees, the whole ecosystem involved in the community development practice. There's a whole world of people that work in the federal government that are making decisions about funding and financing every day that are influencing the way that community planning and development happens. So if we can tell this story, if we can show, look what we did here with these funds, and look how well it helped achieve the goals that you put into those regulations, like that's a really exciting opportunity. And then speaking of storytelling, the final piece that I'm really excited about, because none of this will mean anything if we're not learning anything. This is a learning opportunity. Again, this is not a sort of, here's a project, here's some money. This is, we are going on this journey. So this learning opportunity means that we will be sharing lessons throughout the course of this whole program. And it's designed to have an incredible effect not just on the organizations in their community, but the whole field. So we have, again, as Jamie mentioned yesterday and as we announced on Monday, we have selected PolicyLink to be our learning partner throughout the course of this program as our national research and documentation team to document both for the arts field and for the community development field what it takes, what's new, what's exciting, what's working. Their catchphrase is lifting up what works, and that's what we're hoping they're going to help us do by being our partner on this program. And you're going to hear from Victor Rubin during Jamie Hand's research plenary in just a moment, who is here with us from PolicyLink. So altogether, this is not your average grant program. This is saying that we in philanthropy need to not only provide funding in the form of grants, but we need to bring the full force of our networks and knowledge to help understand and instigate the changes that we want to see in the world. It's an experiment. We're going to learn a lot of great stuff. We're going to do some amazing things. We're going to fail. We're going to shift. We're going to do all of those things. And I'm excited, having met all of the organizations over the last couple of days. I think all of them are just so inspiring in what they're doing. So again, do introduce yourself if you haven't met those finalists. I think we've come a long way in the last 4 years from that first summit, from that first round of grantees. We're really, I think we're just going to continue to achieve these amazing things over the next half decade. And I think, that this sort of moment, changes are happening. Conversations are shifting. I'm going to keep using that word because now it's my new favorite word. There was an article in Inside Philanthropy back in January talking about the Community Development Investments Program and the sort of current things that are happening in arts philanthropy. And they said both creative placemaking is here for the long haul and the future has arrived. I think both of those things are true. And so, again, this is just, I'm wildly excited to go on this journey over the next 3 years. I'm wildly excited to share everything that we're going to learn from this program. And I think, we're going to have, it'll be interesting to have this moment at the end of today where we're going to have a plenary with Mayor Nutter from the civic sector. We're going to have here whose support for things in Philadelphia has fundamentally sort of changed the way that the city works. Laura Sparks from the William Penn Foundation, who's bringing her sort of private sector background, and the William Penn Foundation, who has been such a critical philanthropic infrastructure in the city. And Aviva Kapist from the Village of Arts and Humanities, who many of you saw yesterday, has really managed to marry this world of arts and community development, driving forward this sort of new model. And all of that will be moderated by Rip Rapson, who is sort of becoming the real leader for this conversation around city systems, and how are we looking at city systems, and how are we thinking about cities from this sort of infrastructure, systematic, all of those things, the way that things interrelate, and the arts are a part of that and a core part of that.